Here in Pittsburgh, all the talk today is about last night's big Senate debate matchup, the one and only debate, just 2 weeks before the election. Pennsylvania Democratic Senator Bob Casey attended last night's debate and joins me now. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks very much for being with us. So let's talk about what we saw last night. Well, we saw a very slick performance from a TV doctor, a celebrity doctor, Dr. Mehmet Oz, who was not answering a lot of questions and getting a lot of facts wrong, but certainly performed. Then you saw, of course, John Fetterman recovering from a stroke, a life-threatening stroke 5 months ago, and in this format having difficulty we haven't seen, frankly, in other interviews and in live, appearances with voters. How are Pennsylvania's swing voters, the undecided voters, going to react, and what are they going to take from this debate?
Well, Andrea, I think what you saw last night was a very clear contrast, and I think that's what debates often do. They provide a measure of clarity, especially late in a race, when it comes to the big issues that people are voting on. A lot of people are worried about how they're going to make ends meet the next couple of years. They're worried about retirement security and health care. They're worried about what Republicans want to do on abortion. They're worried about their families, and I think they saw last night in John Fetterman a candidate who understands those struggles, who understands what people are up against every day. And voters in our state know him well. Not just swing voters, but voters across the board know him well. They trust him. And I think they saw some clarity last night, especially on something as fundamental. Do you want to support a raise in the minimum wage to $15? John Fetterman said yes. His opponent, I'm not sure what he was saying, but he never answered that question. And also on something as fundamental to Pennsylvanians as the retirement security and the health care security of Social Security and Medicare. I think the other side is on the same page as Republicans that want to privatize or voucherize or destroy these programs. So I think there was a measure of clarity, and I think a lot of voters connected with what John Fetterman was saying.
Do you think the campaign team made a mistake by letting him debate in this format? Because in 15 seconds for a rebuttal, for instance, you can't even get that closed captioning rolling in time for him to read it, absorb it, and answer. So I'm not sure. A lot of people are saying, well, why did they even agree to this?
No, look, I've been in a lot of campaigns, and there's always second guessing, and I know Democrats sometimes are kind of invent things to worry about at the end of a campaign. That happens in every campaign. I think it was the right decision to have both candidates appear together and to answer questions. And I think John did well in that exchange, and especially in the context of what he was facing, recovering from a stroke. Look, I saw him and talked to him a lot back in the early part of his recovery in May and June, and he's made tremendous progress. And voters understand that because so many of their families have been through health challenges, whether it's a stroke or a heart problem or something else, and they come back, as John said, they get back on their feet, they get knocked down and come back, and they do a really difficult job. So this idea that the speed of your response is somehow indicative of the way you would do the job is really faulty. I know this job well. John is prepared right now to be an effective senator, and I think with even more months of recovery, he's going to be back to where he was. But I think he did really well.
And do you think that he should be more transparent about his medical records? That's sort of a touchstone of all of these campaigns. Donald Trump certainly failed it in the presidential election. Should he be releasing his medical records, and should he have been more transparent back in May about the seriousness of all this when it first happened?
Andrea, I think he was, and I think he is. I think he was transparent back then, talking about his circumstances, that he almost died, and kind of outlining that for people, providing a medical opinion then, and then having a recent update from his doctor based upon a recent appointment. So I think he's been transparent in the record sense. Now, the mechanics of getting a medical record out, I'd leave that for others to figure out. But here's the other part about this, Andrea. In a campaign like this, as you know, and you know Pennsylvania well, he's been on the road talking to voters. He's been not just speaking at rallies, but engaging with voters. And also in the context of that, telling people that he might miss a word or he might bring two words together. And I think that kind of ongoing daily, even hourly transparency is one of the reasons he's ahead in the race. It's not just that he's on their side, he's fighting for their families, but people get it that he's been up front with them over and over again. And I think he did that last night, even at the outset of the debate, kind of giving people a forecast for what might happen in the debate. And I think people understand it, and they understand that people can get knocked down and get back up, and he's doing that.
And I know that in recent appearances, like with Amy Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar, he was answering questions and he was very fluent and very, very substantive. And Pennsylvania voters have seen that also when they are, paying attention to these campaign appearances. Let me also ask you about Dr. Oz, because the Republicans are now pouring millions and millions into Pennsylvania in these closing days. Can Democrats compete with that kind of money?
Yeah, Andrea, I don't think we've ever seen the kind of corporate money come into Pennsylvania. It certainly never happened in a Senate race, maybe not even a governor's race. It's beyond presidential level negative advertising against John Fetterman. So it's about $80 million now of 100% negative ads against John, and they haven't been able to knock him down. My God, if I spent $80 million, I'd expect to be ahead. The other guy's not ahead because people know John Fetterman. They know he comes from them. He knows our state. He knows our people. He understands what they're up against, and they trust him. And everything they've tried to do with that corporate money to try to break that connection between John and voters has not worked. Now, there's still a lot more work to do. We got to keep working to get the vote out and making sure that we're working up to the last minute. But I think when all the votes are counted, John Fetterman's going to win this race.
Senator Bob Casey, a famous name for 2 generations or more here in Pennsylvania. Thanks very much for being with us, sir.
Thanks, Andrea.